From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Greeley has been one of the fastest growing metro areas in the country in recent years, according to U.S. Census data. Since the year 2000, the city has grown from about 76,000 residents to 114,000. And until last week, an ambitious billion-dollar plan to develop 800 acres on the west side of the city would have continued that growth streak. The proposal, known as Catalyst, would include homes, a luxury hotel, an indoor water park, and a new arena for the Colorado Eagles hockey team. City leaders pointed to new jobs and sales tax revenue the development would create, and also promised it would not raise taxes. But over the past year, a group called Greeley Demands Better opposed the project and collected enough signatures to put it before voters. In a special election last Tuesday, Greeley voters repealed the zoning for Catalyst. That stalled the project and calls into question the city's reputation for being friendly to developers. Dan England covered the ups and downs of the Catalyst project for the Colorado Sun. He joined me to talk about how Greeley got here and what it might say about growth along the Northern Front Range. I know, Dan, you live in Greeley. I lived in Greeley for years. It has this reputation as a cow town that it has often struggled to shake off.
Yeah.
How did that play a role in city leaders pursuing this big project?
So there's two things that I think drove this project. One is just the finances, the very real need for us to get some retail and compete with Fort Collins and Loveland for places for people to go. So all those dollars, they call it leakage, don't leak out of the city into other places.
Yeah.
That is the very real financial part of this, but there's also an emotional part. And it's the fact that Greeley for many, many years, in fact, really for a century, has been viewed as sort of the little brother to Fort Collins and Loveland.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had cows here. And so people see us as this gross agricultural place. I remember many years ago, the city's water department won for best tasting water in the country at a conference. It was a really big deal and something that I always thought we had wonderful water here.
Yeah.
And the Denver Post led with Greeley, of all places, won this tasting water.
Ow.
It was just like every time that Greeley has a little victory, we get slapped in the face. And so I saw this project as, man, we finally get to be with the big boys. So I think that played a part into the city pushing so hard for it.
The project seemed like it was on track to happen.
Right.
Last year, this group called Greeley Demands Better formed to oppose the development. Dan, what did they say were their main concerns about the Catalyst project?
This is a really good question. I think when I did the latest story about in the Colorado Sun about, was this voted down? I asked Tommy Butler, who was the councilman who was really opposed to this. Mm-hmm. And he said, this is not an anti-growth initiative. In fact, even the opponents said, you know what? This sounds like a really cool project. And I agreed with them. I mean, a whole hockey arena, that maybe we could have concerts and all these other really cool things with it. It sounded great.
Yeah.
But the city was really taking on all the risk. And I think that bothered people. I think the idea of spending $800 million just quite honestly scared Greeley residents a little bit. And I do think it bothered them too, that why are we taking on the risk when maybe we should be leaving this to the private sector?
Well, voters, as we mentioned, last week repealed the project zoning by a pretty wide margin, 54-46, which means the land for Catalyst will remain farmland for now. The developer, Martin Lind, has filed a lawsuit. He filed that the day before the election to basically void the results. Yeah. What happens next?
So the city has already spent millions of dollars to obtain the financing for this project. Mm-hmm. And it might be tens of millions. And so the city can go back to the council and say, let's zone it this way. They can't turn in the exact project again into at least a year without significant changes to it.
Okay.
Right. But they can bring back other zoning that allows for commercial development. I think that's what they're going to try to do. And I think they're going to try to build, I don't know, maybe what they see as the most profitable things or the things that will draw the most people out there so retail can start to come in and maybe we can start to recoup those costs.
Dan, what do you think this says about how attitudes toward growth are evolving in Greeley and in northern Colorado?
I think, I don't know if it says a lot about evolution. I will say that I think it says one thing about regardless of what community you live in and how friendly it might appear to growth, I think government needs to be more upfront and clear right away with its citizens about what project they're proposing, how much it will cost, and what it could mean for us years down the road. I think their attitude that we just need to do this and you just need to trust us on such a huge project, I would say turned off a lot of residents. In fact, there were some residents who were for the project, but just wanted a public vote on it. That's all they wanted. You know, they weren't even necessarily against it, but they just thought this project was so big that the public should have a say in it.
Well, Dan, you've covered Greeley for decades.
Yep.
How surprised were you to see voters shoot down a retail and minor league sports destination like the one in this proposal?
I thought this would fail. So I'm just going to speak from like a bird's eye view. If you're an average resident of Greeley, again, a conservative town, not a place that has a ton of, I would say, upper class residents here. I think it looks like a bloated project that the city is trying to railroad through without really saying why they need it. And in fairness, the city did post a lot of information later on their website. I do want to say that was very clear and developed project. But from a bird's eye view, it looks like a bloated project that a developer is going to recoup all the profits and not have any skin in the game for. So they need to change that perception, right? I also think maybe they need to be clearer about why Greeley needs sales tax so much and why we need projects like this. It seems like a frivolous thing for $800 million. Maybe we don't really understand why we need it. This was the most contentious and maybe interesting development project I've ever seen Greeley have. So I hope something good comes out of it eventually.
Reporter Dan England has been covering Greeley's proposed creation of a large sports and retail development called Catalyst for the Colorado Sun. We'll include links to his reporting in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.